Hey guys, it's me again. I'm still in the classroom. I just finished putting all the bags together and preparing items for your families to pick up. Hopefully, Mr. Grijalva, Mr. Conrad, and Mr. Josh will pick those up today. I figured I would read a chapter from the classroom. You'll feel like you're right here with me, won't ya? Chapter 13. I wonder how Katie is doing, Matt was thinking as he shook some snow from his head. I hope she's warm, and I hope she's safe. I'll never forgive myself if anything happens to her. Matt frantically looked down at his musket as he tried to figure out how to load it. His shoulders tensed as he thought of the overwhelming task before him. On turning to look at his friend, Matt was horrified to find Israel stooped over on the ground, groaning. "Israel," Matt cried, kneeling down beside him. "Israel, what is it? What's wrong?" But Israel didn't answer. He was on his knees, bracing himself with one hand on the ground, and with the other he reached for Matt's arm. His body suddenly went rigid as he began to violently throw up. Matt turned his head away, embarrassed, and not knowing how to help his friend. When Israel finally exhausted himself, he loosened his grip on Matt's arm. Israel sank back on the ground, trembling. He slowly lifted his head, and Matt winced at the sight of phlegm and blood dripping from Israel's mouth. "Forward on!" The call was given to continue the march. Matt and Henry helped Israel to his feet. He could barely stand and weaved unsteadily as he tried to put one foot in front of the other. "Lean on me, Israel," Matt whispered, coming close behind him. Together, the two of them kept up as best they could. The pace was extremely slow due to the storm and the poor condition of the road. As Matt looked down, he could see the bloodied snow left by the bare feet of those who had gone before him. After what seemed like hours of marching, Matt could feel the full weight of Israel's body. He suddenly realized that Israel had given up trying to walk at all. "Henry, help!" Matt called, for he and Israel had begun to topple over. Henry reached over and grabbed Israel's arm, and together he and Matt tried dragging him along. They hadn't gone far when Israel sank to his knees again, pulling them down. Matt and Henry got to their feet just as an officer rode by on horseback. "Move him to the side of the road," the officer ordered, on seeing Israel slumped over in another fit of retching and coughing. As they dragged him off the road, Matt felt something hot on his hand. He looked down and was horrified to see it was some of the blood that his friend was bringing up. Wiping his hand in the snow, Matt cringed with the thought that it was the first bit of warmth he had felt for hours. Israel was suddenly quiet. The spasms had stopped, but this time he didn't try to stand. "Come on, Israel, I'll help you," Matt offered, but Israel smiled weakly and shook his head. "You'll have to go on without me," he said hoarsely. "Oh no, Israel, you can make it. You can lean on me," Matt cried. "We've got to take care of those Hessians together, remember? We're a team." "Let him be," Henry whispered, pulling Matt away. "There's enough here to take care of the Hessians. Israel's fighting is over. Let him be." But we can't leave him here alone." Matt was incredulous. "He'll freeze to death." "He'll go to his reward either way," Henry told him. "Better to let him out of his agony now than to drag him along any further. Come on now. We've got to catch up to the regiment." "I won't. I can't," Matt said, fighting back the tears. "He's my friend." "And friends die," Henry shouted, grabbing onto the front of Matt's sweatshirt and shaking him hard. "And you'll die too if you stay here with him in this storm. You're sure to freeze to death. Don't you see?" But Matt wouldn't listen. He pulled himself away and knelt down beside Israel. "Stay here then, you little fool," Henry called, exasperated. "But if you change your mind, just get back on the road and follow it till you find us. And whatever you do, don't fall asleep or you'll never waken." He stood, shaking his head, and unwrapping the wool straps that he had wrapped around his hands, he threw to Matt and in a brusque voice said, "Wrap these around yourself and you may save a few fingers." Matt watched as he unbuttoned the blue cuffs on his coat and pulled them down over his own bare knuckles. Then without another word, Henry Shudder turned and ran until he finally disappeared into the long stream of soldiers that moved along the road. Matt put his arm around Israel, who seemed to be dozing. He wondered if Israel even knew he was with him. As the steady line of men marched past, Matt grew panicky with fear. He longed to call out to them to stop and take him with them. He saw that most of them had their heads lowered and didn't even notice him. And those that did gave him a mournful nod and quickly looked away. I wish we were going with them, Matt thought, now jealous of those on their way to battle. At least we would have had a chance. What chance do we have here? He was suddenly overcome with the strong ammonia scent of urine. Looking down, he could see that Israel had wet himself and didn't even seem to know it. Matt took the rags that Henry had thrown him and laid them over Israel's wet pants. It was all he could think to do. His eyes filled with tears as he realized just how helpless Israel had become and how desperate their situation was because of it. Maybe Henry was right, he thought. Maybe friends do die, but that doesn't mean that you have to die with them. Maybe he won't even miss me, Matt thought, looking at Israel's closed eyes. I don't want to die. I want to live. I want to live, he said. Slowly taking his arm from around Israel, Matt reached over and picked up his musket. He stood up and was about to join the soldiers filing past when Israel suddenly opened his eyes and smiled. Go on then, Matthew. Go on ahead. It's all right. I'm just going to take a little nap, he said, curling up on the frozen ground. Matt's musket fell from his hands as he sank back in the snow. No, Israel, stay awake. You've got to stay awake, he cried, pulling his friend up against a tree. Israel blinked and his eyes met Matt's. Don't worry, old goat, Matt said, holding him in his arms. I'm here with you. I'm not going anywhere, he whispered softly. Then, with his half-frozen fingers, he brushed the snow from Israel's cheek. My pouch, Israel said faintly. Can you get it for me? It's in my pack. Matt reached into the pack on Israel's back and pulled out the small leather pouch. The beads. Put them in my hand so I can see them, will you? Israel asked. Sure, Matt replied, opening the bag. Then he uncurled Israel's half-frozen fist. The fingers had become blistered and were turning purple with the cold. Matt held the pouch upside down and carefully shook it. On seeing the pretty blue beads, Israel smiled. They are fine, aren't they? He sighed. Matt looked down at the delicate little beads that were so gently cradled in the dirty, frozen hand. Very fine, Matt said. Promise me, Matthew, that you'll get them to her, Israel said, struggling to keep his head up. Miss Abigail Gates on the Denbury Road, Haverston, Massachusetts. He slumped back down, out of breath. What are you talking about? Matt wiped at the tears falling from his cheek. Of course she'll get them. We're going to bring them to her together, remember? You did invite Katie and me to come and visit you and Abby and the boys. We're going to bring Abby, the beads together, Israel. We are. But Israel shook his head weakly as his breathing became more labored. Please promise me, he gasped. I promise, Matt said, pulling him to his chest. Miss Abigail Gates on the Denbury Road, Haverston, Massachusetts. Don't worry, Israel Gates. You have a friend in Matthew Carlton, he whispered softly as the tears on his face began to freeze. You can depend upon it. Israel could no longer speak, but Matt could feel him thanking him with his eyes. Matt put the beads in his sweatshirt pocket, keeping his other arm around his friend. They sat huddled together like that for a long time. The steady stream of soldiers passing before them began to blur as Matt's field of vision narrowed. The howling of the wind seemed to lessen, and enticing quiet crept over the landscape as the snow silently encased the two comrades in its frozen cocoon. Matt felt his eyes beginning to close, and to help him fight the urge to sleep, he began to talk. He told Israel all about himself and his life in the future. Israel seemed to be going in and out of consciousness as Matt rattled on about dirt bikes, VCRs, and pizza. And, oh yeah, Batman. I've got to tell you about Batman. See, there's this guy, and his name is Bruce Wayne, who's living in Gotham City. Are you listening, Israel? Israel, are you listening? And that was chapter 13, and this video is 10 minutes long. Thanks for sticking it out, kids. And as always, somebody wanted but so then summary, as well as the chapters 13 through 16 pages that I put up on Google Classroom. Chapter 14 and on coming as well today, probably. Peace.